Hello again, video number 3. So, started off with some social topics that inspired me to start this process, and then I talked about my passions, drinks being the first one, music being another one. They were in no particular order, but it fits an order that I spoke about before, and I'll probably do videos in that order and cycle through as we go, or as topics and inspiration finds me. But you can always mix it. So I'll be probably having a whiskey or a beer or a wine most videos. Today I am having Oban. Again, similar, nice, very golden colour, though I'm colourblind, so I could be wrong. And now there's a bottle there, quite a nice bottle. It is a Highland Malt, 14 years old, aged. Very nice. So Highlands aren't my favourite region. Islay is typically my favourite when it comes to scotches. And Highland is not as peaty. So you can get ones such as Leprous, just there. It's very, very peaty. They say they're the most peaty. I've certainly had a lot of enjoyment with those around for that particular flavour. Ardbeg is another great peaty whiskey. If you like the richness and the smoky flavours, peat's great, but peat also has this strange flavour that it's hard to describe why it's good. Essentially, peat is rotten mud that's been rotting for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and for some reason, when you make whiskey out of it, it's delicious. So last video I was talking about bourbon tasting like dirt as a negative. In the case of peat or peaty whiskies, particularly the Isleys, it's actually delicious. Once you get a taste for it, it's very acquirable, but you do have to acquire it. So there are other ones that are not so peaty. So Lagavulin, absolutely one of my favourite drops, is usually a 16-year, and it's really, really high levels of smoke in the flavour, and not much dirt to the peat or muddiness to the flavour. Like I said, if you like Leprous and Ardbeg, you'll have no trouble with that dirtiness, but sometimes it's not what you're after because it's very strong and very rich. And for some people, it's too much. So Lagavulin's a good go-to when you want to cover. You want that smoke and richness, but you don't like the dirt. I happen to like it, but Lagavulin is more drinkable and easy drinking because it's not as in your face, not as hard. Curiously, my favourite whiskey or favourite distillery of all time is Highland Park. There's a couple of bottles up there from them. Highland Park 18-year was my first high shelf whiskey that I ever tasted, and I haven't been the same ever since. That actually used to be my everyday, or every other day, whiskey, but it's $170 a bottle. So I had to shut that down when I wanted to plan for a future and a family. So it's actually not in the Highlands. It's a unique distillery. It's actually in the Orkneys, and there's no other distilleries there. So it's actually outside of region. So the other regions are Highland, Lowland, Speyside, Islay, a few others. Campbelltown is another region with a few distilleries. So they all tend to have their own basic suite of profiles. So the stuff they make it from seems to be a bit more similar, and you get stuff in line with that. Now, Oban is a Highland, like I said, so it's not as smoky or rich. Highland Park is very rich and balanced. It's got lots of different characters that fit together well. None of them particularly stand out. It just tastes great. They all fit together very nice, and it's hard to pick out single definable characters that are standouts from the others. Highland, a bit milder in terms of the overall flavour. Doesn't hit you over the head. Kind of crisp start. It's very warming. So one of the things I noticed with Irish whiskies, they give you that feeling of warmth, not just the alcohol, of course, but just something about the flavour feels nice and warm. And the Highlands do have a bit of that. The Oban here is very, very good for that. And yeah, I mean, it's nutty. It's got a sort of like kind of a carroty feel, like kind of like a carrot cake. Not very sweet though, so it's a little bit drier, a little bit warmer, and very easy drinking. So a very light flavour. So bit expensive for how good it is. Typically from Dan Murphy's, it's about $118 a bottle. I'm not sold on that price point for this one, but that's my preference. I don't like the milder flavours. I prefer the meatier flavours. So if I was going to spend that kind of money, I would much rather go for a Lefreg or a Lagavulin, which is about the same amount, where it's got that really intense and significant punch in the smoke or the peat. So that's Oban today. Onto music. Music's a huge topic. I could talk about bands and music in general, music theory. My meager experiences at trying to learn bass guitar. You can see top one of my bass guitars there, which is a long time work in progress. But what I'm talking about today is probably Leprous. So I've been going to live gigs, particularly metal gigs, probably 3-4 times a year as a minimum, since I was 22, so 12 years. It's a lot of gigs. Obviously, there's some small local ones, some bigger major ones thrown in there as well. Typically from Canberra. The local ones are very small, and you go to Sydney for the international acts. Although you are lucky sometimes, they do tour if you're very lucky. To Canberra, which is quite small if you don't know it. Now, I used to, if I was going to see a band and there were 2 or 3 other bands on the bill, I would look them up, watch them on YouTube or Bandcamp, and listen to their stuff, get an idea and a feel for what to expect, so I could follow along with the live performance. Because oftentimes the intensity of the volume and the atmosphere is, you don't get as precise or as clear an audio quality. So if it's complicated music, which metal typically is, then it might be harder for you to follow it if you haven't heard it before in a clearer context, such as earphones, headphones. But just out of, I think, happenstance and lack of time, I went to a couple of gigs where I hadn't listened to any of the other bands other than the main one that I was going to see. And I actually realised that the surprise can be great. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it is too technical or too complicated to follow. But as I've gone on, I think I've appreciated the surprise a lot more. So how did we find out about Leprous? So my brother loves progressive music, not necessarily metal, as long as it's progressive, and particularly stuff with an intellectual bent in themes he's a big fan of, but never been big on metal in general. He finds the gruff vocals often put him off. I don't have that problem. And I've always been urging him to give metal a go because I know that he likes the progressive and the complexity. And in metal there's some amazing and mind-blowingly good progressive stuff going on. So I invited him to a local gig here in Canberra to a band called Ni Obliviscaris, who are actually from Brisbane. Excellent band. These have a violin, keyboards, not your typical metal band. They use a combination of clean vocals and growl vocals, 2 different vocalists. One of them's actually also the keyboardist and the violinist, so he's a busy guy. Great stuff. Very symphonic, orchestral, grand production, whole concept albums where it's basically one song the whole way through in the same way a symphony would be. You can look at it as one piece of music with movements. So I really like that. Dig that really well, as did my brother. And one of the warm-up acts was an instrumental called Pliny, who's a guitarist from Sydney. Look up his stuff. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel in the description, because if you like clean guitar and unbelievable talent, really good progressive stuff, and even if you're not into metal vocals, it's perfect because it's instrumental. it's just amazingly good guitar, second guitar, bass, and drums. So he was great. Now, he's actually just a guitarist when he writes. He does write most of, I believe, all the parts. So guitars, drums, bass, effects. But when he tours, he needs bands. So while he was touring with Leprous, he had a bassist and guitarist from another Sydney band called Helix Nebula. Simon Grove is that bassist, and he's got another YouTube channel you should check out. Not heaps of videos, but he's excellent bassist if you're into bass like I am. Inspirational to watch. Very talented. I actually met his mum at one of their gigs lately, more recently. So with Pliny, he's quite popular in the progressive metal scene. Online, YouTube, there's a lot of sharing of music in the internet age, where an artist will put together something, another artist will see it, appreciate it, send through a solo to put in, and then they collaborate and make even more really good music, which is awesome. So we were going up to see the Helix Nebula after we found out about them via Nebula Viscaris via Pliny. And Helix were great. Very, very technical. Less melodic. Oh, no, not less melodic. Less nice sounding. Less calmer points in the songs than Pliny typically does. A bit more intense, which is more my stick than my brother's. So I was really digging it. He was appreciative of the technicality of it, but wasn't vibing the rhythms and the melodies as much, because it was a bit quick for him. More than he likes, he could follow it, but you know what I mean. But then the headline act was Leprous. Now, I hadn't watched any of their things. I was can't remember if I made a conscious decision to just leave it, or I just didn't have the time before the gig snuck up on us and we had to head up to Sydney. And what it was, not just a surprise, it was an awe-inspiring performance. So, for a start, it's middle of summer in Australia, and Sydney's on the coast, so it's humid. It's like 37 degrees Celsius, which is well over 100 and something for Americans in Fahrenheit. And inside, the aircon's not working particularly well, so it is stinking hot. And you're playing complicated, fast technical music, you're going to get sweaty, you're under lights. And Leprous, who are Norwegian, came out in multiple layers and long sleeve shirts, undershirt, long sleeve button shirt, and a vest. Like crazy people. They were sweating and absolutely soaked to the bone by the end of the gig. But kudos to them for sticking it out. But blew me away. They had a totally unique sound I'd never heard before. So there might be people that inspired them that I don't know about, but I've never seen how they put it together. Never heard it like that before. So the gist is basically that they have a sort of slow melodic progression, and low tone guitars. Okay, so 2 guitars and a bass, pretty standard. But they're trucking along at a pretty slow melodic progression in that long sustained notes. The chords move up and down relatively slowly. I might replay the same note a few times. And some synth and keyboards. Again, quite slow tempo. Fitting pretty closely to the guitars. The drums, on the other hand, are by a drummer named Bard Kolstad. Check him out. I'll put all the links in the description because he is a beast. He's a young fella. I don't know how old he is, but he looks very young. Very jazz influenced drumming style, really, really quick, really intense, but it's not mixed high. It's not too loud. So typically in technical metal or progressive metal, drums are pretty key to driving the song, and they'll be mixed quite high. Especially if the guitars aren't the focus. There's not much soloing going on in Leprous. It's not shredding or anything like that. So that's not taking your focus. The guitars aren't taking your focus. The synth isn't taking your focus. It's fitting in with the guitars. The drums are very intense, but they're not loud. He's often ghost noting, playing very lightly, but very quickly. And very complicated drum lines, lots of syncopation, lots of off time, lots of polyrhythm. So intensity's up here, volumes average, fits in, maybe even a bit quiet for drums. Vocals, mostly clean. There's a little bit of growl. Some of the earlier songs, particularly, versus the more recent album. But this guy, can't remember his name, he's got unbelievably beautiful, clean mid-range vocals and a ridiculously wide and high falsetto, which he uses a lot. So it's this really bizarre mix of fast but quiet drums, relatively slow tempo, calm but low tone guitars, and really high, intense, long sustained vocals. Listen to it. It's amazing. Seeing it live really added. So glad I saw them live before I heard them, because I was spellbound. I looked over to my brother. We were both stunned mouths open, eyes wide, amazed. Took my brain a while to catch up. I was like, what is this? What is even happening? I'm not getting it. But once I clicked and I was following it, it had a really profound, evocative response from me, in that the themes of the songs and the vibe provided a really, it puts you off, makes you feel tense and uncomfortable, but really mentally engaged, because everything's firing and working together in a really intricate way that wakes you up mentally. Your brain's got to be on to follow it, and it's mesmerizing. Like the drums in particular, because they're quiet but they are intense, and they're not necessarily following the same tempo as the guitars, produces this tension. It always feels like it's about to explode the whole time. So, one of their songs you could think of as The Hurt Locker. You're on the edge of your seat waiting for something interesting. Well, not necessarily interesting. The whole thing's interesting, but you're there on edge because it's in the background. It's not quite there, and your brain's trying to catch it and trying to grab onto it, but it's never taking the focus away from the whole song. And that's where it's a bit interesting, because like I was saying before, you'll often in shreddy power metal bands, the guitars are the focus. In a lot of technical death metal, the drums are the focus, or the vocals in some bands. Vocals are the focus, particularly more clean vocal metal or progressive groups. The lyrics are focal point, and they're mixed higher and they're more obvious, and they keep your attention. The other stuff supports that. In Leprous, everything has its place and works together as a team to produce this really amazing ambience that is just so engaging. I've been listening to them since I went to that gig, probably the most out of any band. I wouldn't say they're my favourite, because they probably need more body of work, and what they do is pretty niche. Also, Bard, the drummer, he's only been on since the last album, which is, in my opinion, the best. So the funny thing, there is the two albums before that, Bilateral and Coal, and then the new album that they were tearing when we saw them is The Congregation. Check them all out. They're all great, but the drumming is a cut above, in my mind, on The Congregation. They do have a new one coming out very shortly, which I'm very, very excited for. I've watched the single they've released, From the Flame, dozens of times. And again, it's a bit different. So I think they're constantly evolving, which is really exciting to see. So I'm hoping that the influence of the new drummer, Bard, continues, and he steps up in a similar vein to what they did on The Congregation, to produce those evocative effects I was talking about. It's absolutely phenomenal. Video is getting a bit long. I will probably end it there and do another one. Cheers.